Welcome back. This is Manhood Mindset on WVGS 91.9, The Buzz.
Yes, sir. We all the way back, and we happen to be black. Ladies and gentlemen. So thank y'all so much for tuning back in. Manhood Mindset, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, man. This is WVGS 91.9, The Buzz. The number is 912-478-7364. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the attempt to support the national campaign for Brother You On My Mind, which is an initiative for African American men and pretty much everybody to talk about mental health. And today we have a very, very special guest in the house today. Very important person, I would say, just in life, but also in academia, in mentoring several students that have walk through the walls of walk in the halls of Georgia Southern University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the powerful, the great Dr. Saba Jallow. Appreciate it. Dr. Jallow, what's up? How you doing?
Good evening, Chris. Good evening, Dale.
Good evening.
Dion.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
This evening.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me to come here to share with you.
Yes, sir.
Some of the little things that I know we can make things better for everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Improving the human condition.
Yes, sir. And we got Dion in the house. Holler at the people real quick. Tell them who you are.
All right, what's up, everybody? My name is Dion Hargrove. I'm me.
That's what's up. That's what's up, man. So what we like to do is just welcome everybody to the show and talk about, how we are and what kind of week we're having right now. And then we're going to get right into the topic because we got a few minutes tonight. We want to get to the point, and we got some people that's listening tonight on purpose because they heard you actually going to be on the show. So they don't want to hear too much about us. They want to hear what you got to say, but we want to check in and let people know who we are and how we're doing, man. So fellas, how's y'all week's been going on so far?
It's been a long week. Had a lot of assignments due, but today is a very special day.
Right.
Today, a year ago, I became a father.
That's what's up.
So it's my son's birthday today.
That's good.
Aiden, Daddy loves you, and you're always on my mind. And I'm so happy to share my life with you, son.
Happy birthday, Aiden.
Happy birthday.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up.
Future
Proud of
kid.
you, man. Proud of you. Dion, man, what you had going on? What was up with you this week, bro?
This week I'm trying to recover from a bad decision I made last week. This new Mass Effect game came out, and I've been spending pretty much all my night staying up playing that and neglecting my responsibility as a student. So I just been recovering from that decision.
That's what's up. Dr. Jallow, how's your week been going, sir?
Well, the week has been going well so far. Okay. Long days, but going well.
I understand.
So far, so good.
I understand, man.
Yes.
That's good stuff. My week has been my week, I would say. A lot of things been going on. Still just keeping head on strong, and we're going to keep trucking, and we're going to make the best of everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shout out to the fam back in Atlanta, Georgia, man. Love y'all very much. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Jallow.
Yes.
Can you tell the people, who is Dr. Saba Jallow? Who are you, sir?
I am Saba Jallow. I was born in the Gambia in West Africa.
Okay.
Came to school to the United States. Got a degree in political science, and I'm now an associate professor at Georgia Southern.
All right.
I'm the director of the Center for Africana Studies.
All righty. And the Center for Africana Studies, where are you located on campus?
We are located on the second floor of the Carl building.
Okay.
And we do have artifacts, videotapes, books, and materials that students can always be able to come and share.
Yes, sir.
And learn, interact, and help each other navigate these sometimes difficult waters that we all have to go through.
Exactly.
As a minority group.
Exactly. We're going to be talking about those difficult waters tonight, and, some of your suggestions of how people can navigate through those waters as well. Yes. All right. So now, you said, what motivated you to come to America in the first place?
Well, it's the opportunities that this country had to offer in terms of education.
Okay.
And the fact that, I had relatives who were here before.
Okay.
And that became the incentive and the way, because sometimes it takes somebody else to pick you up.
Exactly.
And carry you through.
That's real.
And family is always central to that.
Cool. So you had an incentive to come, and you had people already here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Relatives here. Yeah.
Got you. So now, you said political science.
Yes.
Why political science?
Well, political science is important in terms of understanding power relationships,
Okay.
whether it's at the individual level or at the national or international level.
Okay.
You've got a whole set of actors
Hmm.
who are all trying to influence each other in the midst of scarce resources.
Hmm.
And in order for one to be able to get access to those resources, you must have a new configuration as to how we're going to play the game so that we all can maintain stability
Yeah.
and not be at war with each other.
Hmm. Okay. What are some of the misconceptions that you've seen students have about political science? Because I know, growing, like when you first met me, I was just like, I don't know what that is. I don't like politics. I don't like science. So why would I put them together, right?
Well, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
because
So,
some people-
what have you seen
Yes.
students? What do they misunderstand about political science?
Well, I think one of the things they might not understand well is the fact that knowing the institutions which make policy on your behalf, which make laws on your behalf, would enable you to be able to get to the resources that you need in achieving your own goals in life. Because the people who make policy, people who make laws, determine where resource flows would go and who would get access to those resources.
Now, and you say people who make laws, so you're very in tune with the people who have perceived power in our society.
Yes.
In your opinion, how does that power manifest? How do those people get in power? And I know the word is politics, but kind of guide us through that whole scenario.
Well, there are different aspects to that. You can argue that because of interest groups organize to try and influence what policies
Okay.
would be made on their behalf.
Okay.
And you as a group, whether you are a minority group or a women's group or an engineering group or regardless of your career, if you cannot be able to articulate what your common goals have as a group, then you are not likely to participate in that political space and have access to the resource necessary for you to be able to maintain yourself as a community.
Now, you mentioned articulate, right? Now, there is a right and wrong way to do anything.
True.
There is a more effective way to do pretty much everything, right?
Exactly.
What is, I guess I would like to say, what is the wrong way to try to articulate your issues or your concerns in a political arena?
That's a very difficult question.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because we're seeing so much stuff.
I'll attempt to respond to the question, Chris,
Okay.
in the sense that organizing, sometimes time, as the saying goes, time is of the essence. And issues come and go, and you have to be able to select the timing and all the factors and resources that you need for you to be able to follow through with whatever plan or strategy you have.
Okay.
Because if you know that you are not going to achieve your goal,
Right.
and you get into it disorganized or somehow not comfortable in terms of what you might achieve,
Right.
then you are likely to come back and revisit it. But that's human nature.
Right.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Right.
We fail, we come back, we rise up, as black people in this country now, that you can be at the bottom and still rise up and be able to organize and do things. Sometimes people might perceive it as the wrong thing because of the approach you used, but it's a combination of different sets of people who can organize. Some people might take it as being very radical, some as accommodational, but at the same time the goal is to achieve the same thing, the outcome for everybody, especially in the game of trying to get justice.
Right.
So in that game you have to be able to organize different groups and different interests and move in a way, in such a way that you can be able to say, we've arrived there, we've got our product, and this is the outcome of us getting engaged in this process.
One of the words that I hear often that gets thrown around is the word justice.
Right.
In your opinion, does it exist? And if so, what does it look like?
Justice is not guaranteed to anybody.
Okay.
But in terms of the way society is organized, in some contexts it's possible for you to get it in terms of what are the rules of the game, in terms of defining your humanity, and how everybody has that consciousness of what it means to be human. And in that context, then, if we arrive based on a set of principles which can guide us to some sort of definition which involves everybody, not a select group, but everybody, in terms of determining this is what it means to be justice for humanity, and it becomes part and parcel of that human imprint in your mindset, and you think it and it's diffused throughout society, then we can say that we have arrived at that goal of maybe achieving a semblance of justice. But it's not easy to get, because the actors and the players who are involved in that game might define it differently from somebody else who might be at the bottom.
And that's interesting, because I'm not going to say I was taught this, but I had the inclination that justice was a human right. Or, we're just saying, well, that's not justice. We're supposed to hear for justice, right?
Right.
And so some of us, and I can't speak for a lot of people, but some of us may believe that justice is a birthright. It's something that's given to you just for being born, or just by being considered a human being. But if I heard you correctly, justice is something that we're supposed to be trying to work for, strive for, produce. And it's not necessarily guaranteed.
It's not necessarily guaranteed, especially depending on the environment, depending on the architecture, the political and economic architecture of that society determines the rules of the game. It, in essence, defines the map of human geography. In terms of groups, their identification and what access they have and for what rights somebody else has defined for them.
You mentioned the game.
Yeah.
In your opinion, we're going to get right to it. In your opinion, how are, quote unquote, people who identify as black, in your opinion, how are they playing the game? How are black people playing the game that you mentioned?
That is another difficult question, because you can talk about categories of black people.
Right.
Because of those who have achieved what they think is that, they're using their own skill sets or their intellect to achieve their goals. And then you've got other people who have been left out in terms of that fabric of what it means to be a black person in America or in Africa or anywhere around the world for that matter. Based on the history, based on where they have been, based on that compass that they are trying to find a footprint, given the history, given the travails that they have gone through, that they are trying to define. Because when it comes to being black is being a member of the human race. And when it comes to the question of defining, say, black history is also world history. As long as we don't acknowledge it across race, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to acknowledge the history of other people who have been left out. Because that completes the whole for humanity.
And that goes to the responsibility you just said about producing justice. Okay. Fellas, y'all got anything y'all want to add?
I would like to ask, because I feel like it's important for us to understand who we are and where we come from and our strength by our heritage. How do you, I can't say enough to say that it's a problem, but for those of us who, when we were brought over here, we kind of got cut off from our heritage, our background, where we're from. There was this one lady who was from Nigeria, and I can't find her again to save the life of me. She was able to look at me to a certain extent and tell me where my people would probably come from and where to start looking. And how do we do that when in some cases we found that I don't want to say all Africans, but some Africans aren't welcoming to us coming back and trying to rediscover who we are or see us as Americans or separate or diluted. How do we rediscover our roots and get back into the traditions authentically?
Good question.
We will prepare for you, Doc.
That's an excellent question. The way I would respond to that is, it's a lot of miscommunication in terms of understanding where I'm standing when it comes to my perception of another group of people, so that it's a two-way street. Because the way Africans who come here, some of them might think that, I'm just here to get an education and leave and go home, and I don't want to be part and parcel of this culture. But at the same time, you get African Americans who might have this perception based on what the media projects Africa to be, that is different. But you raise a good point, that experiences, individual experiences or group experiences, inform what we perceive as negative or positive towards any group of people. And it can be dealing with somebody from Africa who comes here who doesn't understand the history of African American people in terms of the experiences they have gone through. Or they might want to separate themselves from it, but they cannot, because they are part and parcel of it. I mean, their history in Africa, communities were dislocated. The natural state of affairs which would have evolved for those societies to develop was curtailed, cut off. That's what slavery did to a lot of societies which were evolving over time. So the question that you raise, it's important. John Henry Clark, Du Bois, Van Septima, and a lot of other people have tried to address that question. Carter G. Woodson, about the history of black people. That if you look at it historically, there have been so many forums or fora that people from Africa, the Western Hemisphere, and the diaspora have worked together. For example, most of those African leaders who went back to Africa and brought independence to some of those African countries were educated at HBCUs in the United States. Yes. And in places like Howard University, in places like different HBCUs around this country. People like Kwame Nkrumah, for example. Nnamdi Azikiwe and others who went home. Kwame Nkrumah brought independence to Ghana. Nnamdi Azikiwe went to Nigeria, was a very powerful, in fact, the premier of the eastern region of Nigeria at that time. So there was that Pan-Africanism going on. And if you think of it, the Pan-African movement has been going on for a long, long time in terms of maintaining those links. You don't have to go far to look at the Gullah Geechee populations in Sapelo Island, who still maintain their African heritage and still talk in terms of the African language and the Pidgin English or the Creole English. So that's a very important question. I cannot give you all the answers basically today, but I think it's something we need to discuss more because it's important in terms of galvanizing population that they can do things in common. And it goes across race, really. If you're talking about African history or African people, the world is not here for us to revisit African history. African history is for every race because we are part and parcel of the human family. And if we are going to be able to help, maintain stability globally, we must understand it, acknowledge it, and accept it, that this is the way forward as a human race, that we can be able to solve problems. But once we start putting people into categories, then we miss the message that Mother Nature is giving us in terms of our environment, in terms of our psyche and everything else that we have.
Well, I have another question. Now, you said that you grew up in
Gambia.
In Gambia, okay.
Yes.
And you would say there the race is primarily African, like of black.
Yes, it's Africans, majority. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How did it feel to grow up in an environment where you just be a man, like you weren't a white man, or like you weren't, like, I don't know if you were, but were you taught, hey, you have to do this because you're a black man? How did it feel growing up?
Yeah, we need to hear this.
No, we didn't. That's an excellent question.
Yes.
We didn't have to go through that. You might have it in terms of maybe depending on which part of the city you live in, class as a variable becomes important, and the kind sometimes religion comes in as a factor, and of course ethnicity sometimes, and that is basically caused by an elite class of people because of their own personal interests who aggravate those situations. But you raise an excellent question when it comes to not being told that, you have to act in a measured way, be very careful and all of that. No. I went to school. I went to a Catholic high school. Most of our teachers were Catholic priests from Ireland and England. And we had some white students, but they were a minority. But guess what? They could speak the African languages.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yes, and when we used to try and raise money, there's an event which goes on during Christmas, where we build model ships, and we have candles and drums and all of that go from one neighborhood to the other to try and get gifts, raise money for a given cause. You would have those students, who are white, who happen to be Asian or whatever race, would be participants in it because the culture is strong enough to engage everybody. So we didn't go through that. You didn't have a system which would say, oh, you black, you white, or anything like that. And there have been exceptions to that when the question of quote-unquote tribalism comes into play.
Yeah.
In a place like Rwanda, when you had that ethnic conflict there and all those people were killed. Now in Rwanda, it is unconstitutional for you to call yourself a Tutsi or a Hutu.
Really?
Yes. So
wow.
Rwanda has one of the fastest growing economies today in Africa. Since 1994 to now, it's a booming economy.
Please talk about that because they portray Africa as a poor country, but it's not that way.
No, well, but some of the fastest growing economies today in the world are in Africa. Yes.
That's the reason why we're getting that picture.
Yes, they are. Because of the resource, on top resource, or the resource that they have. For example, the cell phone that you use has a mineral called coltan. Without it, it might not be able to function the way you think it would. So it's a lot of resources, but you've got domestic constraints that has to do with leadership, and then you have outside constraints to being imposed in terms of having access to untapped resources, whether it's oil, whether it's gold, whether it's diamonds, whether it's, all kinds of resources you can think of. Just think of Democratic Republic of Congo alone. Has enough resources there to be able to develop most of Africa if it was basically utilized for that purpose, and the leaders allow it to do that.
Wow. Well, why do you, and I'm sorry to bombard you with questions.
No,
we got to.
Let me just...
we got to.
let me just show you this.
Alrighty.
But why do you think that our media bombards us with images that make us fear Africa, as in diseases, malaria, and poverty? Why do you think it is that they keep us from the successful and thriving parts of Africa? Is there, from my understanding, there's still like kingdoms and very wealthy places and beautiful cities in Africa with great architecture.
Yes, they do. They do. The thing is, perception, it's very important. It's critical to how you can be able to interact with it. Because once you mislabel a given group, when you meet them, you think that you are better. But you'll be surprised when, the table is turned. So the point here being that a lot of African countries, true, there is malaria, and they're fighting. They're doing fighting hard. The World Health Organization, the African governments, non-governmental organizations, or even people now who are raising money in the United States, or companies for that matter, raising money for UNICEF. All of that is to help that situation and mitigate that situation of malaria or any of the things that were taking place. So we have to admit that there are problems. But those governments are doing the best they can with the scarce resources they have to solve those problems. The rest of the world, there are a lot of good things taking place in Africa. But most of the time, just like here in this country, most people focus on the negative. That's what would be on the front page. Less so than the positive things. Because that's what sells. Right?
So what you're saying is no matter how historic and important the motherland is, human conflict is inevitable for the most part?
Well, I guess we're trying to make sure that we don't have that conflict.
Right.
That is because as long as you have scarce resources anywhere, regardless of which part of the world you are in, you're going to have some conflict.
Right.
But that conflict does not rise to the level that your inhumanity takes over your humanity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You got another one?
And I know you say you don't have all the answers, but how will we even? Because I'm proud to be black. I'm actually one of the few people that, even though I love myself, I realize that I'm a diluted version of who I really am.
No, but everybody in this world is diluted one way or the other. That's
true.
I mean, if you look at it, so it's an evolutionary process that we're all going through.
But how do you? It just the older I get and the more I look at it, I feel so incomplete because it's just beyond the fact that I'm black. I don't know anything like from my region of wherever my people are from. There could be traditions or important meanings or significance to my family that I'll never know. How do I even?
That's a very good question. Again, some people now get into Ancestry.com. They have those.
That works for us.
Yeah,
because I was just like, that's, you know what? That gets me to wonder about Ancestry. I'm like, y'all solved the slavery question? I'm like, y'all need all the money. If Ancestry can be like, you know what, I heard about slavery, but we got all the documents.
You came from here.
Yeah.
We know where you came from.
I like, man, Ancestry, y'all some bad mother, shut your mouths. You understand what I'm saying? I like, yeah.
Or DNA kits. I mean, people are trying to find, to have some sort of that roadmap. We can get them to address the kind of question you just raised, which is very important because we have to be able to center ourselves before we can be able to make any move strategic for us to be able to get access to what we deserve as a people.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm tapped out at the moment.
No, well, that was a good question. Dion, you got a question?
I do. Oh, okay. Let's see if I can word this correctly.
Just try your best, man. We're here with you.
All right. So this came from a recent news story where this happened like a couple of years back. Missionary group that goes over to Africa to help out, and one of the teens was revealed to have been raping boys and girls over there. He's finally been convicted and he's going to prison for it. And my question is, because I've been hearing a lot of reports about this, as you said, how the World Trade Organizations want to help Africa. There's been a lot of stories of people who say they want to help Africa. They try to send money, resources, they adopt kids, but then it later comes out that they don't really get the money, and the kids are usually abused and never heard from because there's no resources to check on these kids, and they are possibly being used as organ trafficking, which is an issue that we're having here in the United States of America, as modern day slavery, even in the sex trafficking issues. So what I want you to possibly do is shed some light on these situations and what's going on in Africa, possibly why it is, and what can we possibly do to help out, like really help out, not say help out and then make stuff
or
worse.
Send money to a P.O. box.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of non-governmental organizations throughout the world. Some are doing very well in terms of helping people when it comes to their mission, and some are there just to make money. And the ones that have been pursuing the kinds of things you described, essentially in the long term they would fail because the rest of the world would be watching too, and controls would be put in place. But it's ongoing. Human trafficking is big, and you got people on the ground. They're working with those groups out there trying to make money, and essentially it's about getting access to resources. And when it comes to that, sometimes there's a tendency to diminish the humanity, what is human in us. That greed element, once it takes over, it makes it worse. And you can see that in any society. But in Africa, because the institutions are not that strong in terms of controlling, having an oversight function, then people can get away with so many things because the governments are limited in terms of the resource they have, and people take it for granted. I can go there and do anything I want. But it's changing, though. We have to have an optimistic vision of where we're going. That's why the African Union has an Agenda 2063, which basically gives you a timeline as to where they want Africa to be. And that is basically diffused now throughout all the member states of the African Union. That's why we try to train young people to understand what the resources of Africa, how we can develop it, not only for Africa, because the resources in Africa belong not only to Africans, but to the whole world, because that's what we're using it for. I mean, we don't want any other kind of neocolonialism.
Right.
No. Because right now, you've got a young population. Out of that 1.02 billion people in Africa, 40% of them are under the age of 15, for one thing. So you have to be able to have some sort of it's building a critical mass with, over time, with education and a level of consciousness of what their rights are within the governments that they have. And the fact that they're moving to get these regional economic communities like ECOWAS, SADC, ECOWAS and IGAD and all of that, that the goal is to be able to bring them all together. Since they are small economies, they wouldn't be, sunk. They work together as a group, unite, bring all those economies together, then they can deal from a position of power.
You mentioned the difference. I just want to clarify that it's a very big difference between utilization and exploitation.
Right.
Like Africa is supposed to be utilized.
Right.
Right, because that's the mother continent that has most of the, I guess, essential resources that the planet needs. So it's kind of natural for people to go back to the mother country to utilize the resources. However, when we start talking about exploitation,
that's a different matter.
That is the intent behind your utilization of the mother country.
Precisely.
Okay, cool. Just want to understand. You got another question?
Just going off what he said of coming together, and the people in Africa are working, and with the 2063 initiative.
Yes, Agenda 2063.
Yes,
Agenda 2063.
Yes.
Because I know Dr. Umar Johnson basically gave a report on why he felt that they really had to get Muammar Gaddafi, and how his plan was to build a central bank in Africa and back up that money behind their resources.
By the gold, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was all the resources.
Probably.
Especially the diamonds.
Okay, cool.
And, well, clearly it worked to get rid of him because he's no longer with us. So when you said that 2063, it was like, okay, it's good to see that even though his didn't go all the way through, there's still progress they're still making progress.
Yes. Yes, well, Gaddafi was the leader in Libya from 1969 up to the time he was killed. And Libya being a country with a small population with vast resources in oil, he was able to have that influence and provide for his people and pour in lots of money in other parts of Africa. He believed in African unity. But at the same time, we just have to acknowledge sometimes that leaders sometimes do good. They come to a point where they, go astray when it comes to dealing with their own population.
Okay.
Which he got in, he did.
Okay.
I mean, he was a Pan-Africanist, yes. But at the same time, there were things that he was adopting when it came to his own foreign policy, in terms of imposing certain kinds of conditions on other poorer countries,
right,
that they're not willing to accept that.
Right.
You know, you just don't come tell me because you got the money to give out that I have to accept that. No.
Right.
You know, and that created some tension
Right.
with other members within the African Union, for one thing.
Right.
But also domestic politics was one of the things which made it difficult for him. Yeah.
Domestic politics.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's interesting because sometimes we may think just because someone brings in a whole bunch of resources and everybody's eating good and and has, you know, and living quite comfortably. What's up, bro? Living quite comfortably, that we're supposed to just stand by when some of the
Right.
Yeah,
right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because when you look at his family and, you know, all the gold and
right. Because when we looked at it, I was just like, "What's wrong with that?" But I don't live in Libya. You know what I mean? I'm in Georgia, and I see the commercial, and I just saw you just like, "I want money for my people." I'm like, "What's wrong with that?" Like, so, but I'm extremely ignorant, and I'm not there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and just, I mean, like you said before, a lot of the things that we are exposed to in this country has an edited version. You know what I'm saying? Our news, and honestly, I'm kind of careful how I say the word news anymore because I don't know if it's news, especially if it's edited in a way that somebody wants me to see something. It may not be news. It may be a commercial, you know what I mean, under the name of news. So I just sit back and try to do my own research if I have the time or the interest in certain things. So that's what I really want to ask you about. Some of the miseducation when it comes to Africa. And the things, you know, the images we've been shown about Africa, even the topics and some of the, I guess, quotes and how we see our African leaders, right? Because I know a lot of people, you know, I still haven't researched what I need to research when it comes to African leadership. I know I've been exposed to Nelson Mandela a lot, right? But Nelson Mandela was not the only leader in Africa, correct? Right. And so now I'm looking at my Americanized education of Africa. And the more and more I find out new stuff that's been going on, I find out that I don't need to talk about Africa at all. Like, that's just where I'm at. And it's uncomfortable, but it's a reality, you know what I mean? So I would say, let me ask you this question. For students who understand that they have been severely miseducated about Africa, what is a good first step for them in order to be properly educated about the mother continent?
Well, it's for them to, one, try to maybe get engaged in their own communities and participate in the political process in terms of trying to maybe change the curriculum so that it will be able to, you know, build a foundation. Because in many of those communities, if those parents are involved in terms of, you know, I want to know about me, just like you know about yourself.
Right.
Or you know about me, because then we can be able to work together better.
Right.
And by doing that, it helps everybody.
Okay.
And there will be less conflict in society if we can all have a uniform way of looking at things, yet still we can maintain our differences and accept them and celebrate them together.
That's good. So, because that brings us to one of the main reasons why we brought you here today, the effect on African history to the mindset of a quote-unquote black man in America, right? I do know, and just like Dale was asking earlier, and I just saw on his facial expression when he was asking that question about his lineage or his link back to the mother country. There is a sense of pain that all of us have from disconnect, right? So you're the director of Africana Studies, all right? How have you seen people's mindsets, especially, you know, black men, but of course just students? How have you seen the maturation process? Have you seen people change for the better? Kind of guide us through when people who were not exposed to Africana Studies until after they've been exposed. I see some of your students on Facebook Live, it's like, that's Dr. Jallow. They're very excited that you're on here. So kind of exposed to what you've seen, how people grew.
But you know, a lot of the students who come to these schools, they just want an opportunity and access. You just nod them in the right direction. They'll do the right thing, and they would perform in the best manner you can ever think of.
Yeah.
And what I observed over the years with a lot of these students, they have an interest. And what I do, I'll give you a book, a tape, an article, you go and read. You come to class, we have a discussion.
Yes.
It can be, we have some great discussions about that. And if you, have questions, then you can be able to raise it and debate it, to and fro. And by doing that, we all grow. So one of the ways in terms of looking at the students, they're excellent students I can talk about. You got Nabi Feleke out there, you got, Francis Johnson, you got LaMesha Hunter, you got, some of them are lawyers and attorneys, and they'll tell you that basically the minor, even though it was a minor, it helped them. It energized them to be able to explore and understand human dynamics in such a way that they were able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. By doing that, it gave them the capital to move forward. So that it nudged them in the right direction.
So you've seen a minor become major for a lot of your students. It's like a lot of turning points happen in being exposed to Africana studies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Go ahead and tell the, I know you just came, but go ahead and tell the people who you are. You know what I mean?
It's your boy AK the Don in the building. How y'all doing this evening?
Cooler, man. Cooler. So we got Dr. Jallow in the house. Got right there, Africana Studies.
How are you, Coco?
Good. So you a student. I saw. Yeah. Okay. All right. Small world, man. So you already had him as a professor. So this is my question to you.
Okay.
And I've asked. Literally, that question was about you, right?
Yeah.
How were you going into taking a class in Africana Studies? What kind of person were you then, and what kind of person did you change into after you completed that course?
The type of person I was coming into the course was someone looking for answers.
Okay.
So after the course, I gained a sense of knowledge to not obtaining all my answers, but obtaining ways to find my answers.
Okay.
And through that, it was really about self-awareness because I'm African descent.
Okay.
My parents were born from West Africa, Accra and Kumasi.
Okay.
So growing up in America, I really took the ways of the African Americans. In Africa, they'll call them Akatas. So I took the ways of them. So I was trying to learn the different side, like trying to take on my roots and really understand more of myself and the history that was not given to me growing up in the public school systems.
Right.
So in the classroom with Dr. Jallow, one thing is amazing that I really learned was actually the actual countries in Africa and who they were run by, the colonies that ran each of them, and just trying to understand the difference in Africans and Americans and how we're really similar, although we see the difference in each other based off of what, like you said, news, based off the news or the information that's given in this country. Because in this country, they'll tell you things about how Africa is where there's a third world country, they're starving people there. But when you actually go there, you realize and you'll see how beautiful it is. Cities that have developed, it's a whole civilization that's on the next level that we're not even ready for. We're paying rent for these small cubicles where in Africa you have your own land. The prices that you're paying for an apartment, you probably pay one time in Africa for land and you have your own house that's big, huge.
That's gonna make me.
And that's rent price. And that's we're talking about rent prices there. So it's just taking that class made me appreciate my culture because it was something that I felt like I needed to hide a way to fit in. And while I took the courses there, I started to appreciate more of my heritage and where I come from. So after leaving his class, I really learned more about myself and where I could go to even learn even more information about myself.
Gotcha. Okay. So, well, let me ask you this, and we asked the student, and I asked you about the students. So, you, Dr. Jallow, how have you evolved into the person I'm looking at, that's in front of me right now? How have you evolved by exploring Africana studies and exposing Africana studies to all of these young minds? How have you changed?
Actually, learning is a two-way street.
Yeah.
I mean, you as the professor, you learn from your students.
That's
too.
true.
And, even when you came and talked to the students in class, when they left, when is he coming back? I said, well, I'll call him, because they really like the ideas you and Michael Bow said with them. So for me, it's like a very, it's some sort of a process where you get involved and you feel good when you see your students succeed.
Right.
And every semester you try to better yourself as a professor.
Right.
In terms of areas you think you didn't cover enough because students raised those questions.
Right.
That's why I give them index cards at the beginning of class to ask them, right, for the entire semester, what would you want to learn? What do you want to get? What are the things that you think we should focus on?
That's real.
Yeah, so doing that helps me because it motivates me too to be able to really talk to students and know that, you know, when they leave, they'll be okay.
I need to say this because I know I've said this to you before. I have never taken a credited course from you, but I have learned the most from you being at Georgia Southern. And that's because I've taken field trips with you. And we've talked on several occasions about a lot of different things.
Yes.
And and that's something that I realized as a student of yours who didn't have a credited course. Learning is not based off credit. Like some of the things that I'm writing about now, and even in this dissertation phase, it's things that you've exposed me to. Some of the conversations we've had, some of the things you told me to go research, and I'm like, all this stuff is coming back. You know what I mean? So I just want to say personally, just thank you.
Well, thank you
for being the person who you are, man. Definitely. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Sometimes we think learning is confined to a classroom, if you got into a class or not. And so I think for the student who's listening now, who is not able to take a certain class, right? And they say, man, I wish I could have took that class.
Right. You can just sit down and talk to the people.
I'm a living witness. Yeah, find out who's teaching it.
But you see, when you talk to students, you're learning too.
Right.
You know, you're getting it from different people. And that you have to, it becomes capital that you can use.
Exactly.
And then bring it back to that whole group again. So it becomes a cycle.
Yep.
And that's a knowledge base which nobody can take away from you.
Gotcha.
Because once you share it with people, they can run with it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You had another question?
No.
Not right now? Okay. All right. Now, for the sake of Africana Studies, right, what is the purpose of Africana Studies at Georgia Southern in your opinion? The main purpose of why that is here, why it is a minor, and where is it trying to go? So first of all, why is it here in the first place?
Well, actually, it has it's a good history. People like Dr. Alfred Young was the first director of Africana Studies.
Gotcha.
He's now retired. He lives in Savannah.
Okay.
But he was a professor in history.
Okay.
And people like Mildred Pate, you know, and Goke Periol and myself.
Okay.
Francois Manchuel, you know, and Skidmore Hess.
Yes.
A lot of other faculty, you know, Frank Arasani and Robert Sonnefeld, and, you know, Thomas Klein.
Okay.
So we had a core group of people who, in essence, were helping to make Africana Studies have a footprint on this campus. And you had committed people, administrators at that time, on campus who wanted that to happen because they put in the resources to do that.
Right, because it takes resources and support.
Yes, it's important because we live in a very unique place in Southeast Georgia in terms of the Gullah Geechee presence, in terms of their rich culture, which is not far. It's a big resource in which we can use to be able to tell people, you know, here are people who live on these islands, but their history and traditions are rich, and they have kept their traditions intact in a lot of ways. So they have links with Africa and they have links to America. And there have been studies done by people at the College of Charleston and other places, which in essence have brought people from Sierra Leone like the Rice Coast. So all of those resources around here. And at the same time, we want to expose students to opportunities like the Model African Union.
Yes.
It's very it's very expensive for you to go and study abroad to Africa for one thing. I mean, you can go to Europe, it's cheaper, $390 something dollars. You can, Africa, since the market is not that heavy in terms of traffic, it wouldn't make sense, for planes to be going there, and that it's changing though.
Yeah.
It's evolving.
Yeah.
So with the Model African Union, we try to teach leadership, students to conduct themselves as diplomats, represent African countries, and they get a chance to meet ambassadors in Washington, D.C., so that they can be able to interact and they can be able to resolve conflicts. And they actually write this, like the program here.
Okay.
Which you see, in which they can be able to look at the things which affect African countries. So here you have a simulation in which students in the United States, from all over the United States, Canada, we actually had last February at Howard University.
Right.
We had students from Kenya, from South Korea, from Canada, and from the United States, representing individual African countries. And the person who founded it is still a professor at Harvard, Dr. Michael Nwanze.
Okay.
He comes to our regional model here, and he helps us do that. But we try to teach students diplomatic conduct, leadership, being assertive, and not be, taken for granted.
Right.
That you can be able to stand and fight for yourself.
That strategy, the game you talked about, it's hard to play the game when you're not suited up and you contend as a player in that game. Because if you don't play the game will play you.
Right.
If that's correct.
Right.
And you're talking about political science.
Right.
And science is the study of how things actually work, right?
Right.
And, and for the people who may not understand politics, I was, trust me, I used to say this all the time. I don't do politics.
I'm not a political person.
Yeah, I'm not a political person. I don't do politics, right? However, we don't understand how deep politics goes. It's basically is the allotment of resources for some people over the other.
Yeah.
And regardless if you're not political, you'll start finding out if your water start tasting different.
It determines who gets what, when, and how.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I would say this. Let me ask you this question. When it comes to specific disasters like the Flint water crisis, right? How does politics play into that? Because we're talking about resources, and water is the resource that we need. We're made of mostly water. So when we start talking about the poisoning of water, what is the role of politics in that?
Well, the role of politics, again, comes to access.
Yeah.
And interest groups fighting for what their communities need.
Right.
Because if you don't have the resource, or you are not organized as a group, you are not going to have that political influence, which affects how people who make policy on your behalf.
Right.
If you are not at the table in terms of telling them this is what we demand, or you don't get my vote, you're not going to get it.
So now, if I'm that person that marches, or now this is not me going against marching, what I'm saying is, you mentioned table. Right?
Right.
And that table, usually a table is where the real meetings are at.
Right.
Right? And so, what I just heard you, if I'm a young person and I'm passionate about something, but I'm passionate about it after it happened, am I too late? Or do I have another chance to go?
It can be, it's a mechanism, it's a tool for you to address something which is missing, something which needs to be addressed. And maybe it was not that evident before. But if it was evident and people did not do anything about it, then it becomes a riskier situation in terms of trying to solve it.
It gets worse.
The thing is, if you live in a system which is laissez-faire, is capitalism, right? It's competition too. And you don't organize your group in terms of people who make policy, your local committee, city council. You don't go to city council meetings or county government meetings, board of education, school boards, and all of that. Then you cannot be able to influence how resources are shared. You have to be there in order to get people elected who would serve your interests too.
Right.
That's what drives this economy. Yes.
So our status of not being political is pretty much retroactive. I mean, not retroactive, but it's counterproductive.
You mean counterproductive?
It's counterproductive.
Yes,
it's
because I think you have to be able to organize that. And one of the things I've been saying, there's a group in Statesboro, the Beloved Community. You know, you work with them.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the young people today, I mean, if you engage them, if you had to just get some people together and maybe invest in a coding school, because coding, you know, computers and all of that, just like what you do, is the future. It's big data and all of that in terms of selling a product. Why don't we invest in those communities, have them, you know, throughout, in those communities which are seen to be disadvantaged or poor, invest in those young people. Because then, when they graduate with that kind of background, they would get jobs left and right.
Yeah.
They don't have to be sitting at home thinking that, you know, people label them already because they see them as, oh, well, they, you know, there's this self-fulfilling prophecy. We said so. They're no good, this and that. But you give them an opportunity, they'll perform well, and they'll do for themselves. You know?
So politics can influence confidence.
Confidence, it brings in that thing of achieving goals that you think are possible within the constraints of even what exists, which you might not like. You know, because those constraints are there, boundaries are there, but you will get access to those things which you can utilize to basically create that synergy for you to increase that capital that you will use to get things done. Yes.
Respect. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I did have a question. As a friend of mine texted me this question a little bit earlier. We were talking about Africana Studies and what it does for quote unquote either African American, or black students, right? What have you seen as a reaction when you have a non-black student, like a white student or a Latin American student?
Yes.
Right.
I've had white students.
Right. So now we may have some white. We may have some white listeners like, why do I need to take Africana Studies?
And you know, a lot of them actually did not have that kind of exposure.
Of course.
You know, and when they got that, they said, you know, it's bad that they were not taught that in the high schools. Just
feel
like
betrayed.
Just like the black kids, you know, the curriculum. Because you ask the students, how much of black, because it shouldn't be black history. Black history is for everybody.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
It should be part and parcel of everything that goes on. And it should be given the same kind of, you know, energy and resource that it deserves. Because by doing so, we're equalizing everything. And everybody says in that body of knowledge, which in essence would not make me afraid of you because you're white, or you are afraid of me because I'm black.
Right.
There's a knowledge deficit there, in which when we face each other because of our color differences, which have all those misperceptions, labels, all of a sudden that's what comes out of our brain cells telling us, you know, that's something bad, that's, you know, all those images and symbols that are negative, those are the ones we see. But if you can be able to get people together and say, look, we left a portion of our human history. We need to be able to bring it back on that table of equality for everybody, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, to share it, whether it's Native American history, women and gender studies history, or Asian history. It's all part and parcel of human history.
Right. And so what a lot of people don't even understand is even if I come from a place of privilege, you may still be strategically miseducated.
Right. And so, like Karaji Woodson,
exactly,
about the miseducation of the Negro.
Right, and also too, but if you miseducate the Negro, you're going to miseducate a lot of people around the Negro as well. If we're part of the, if Negroes are a part of the human family, and you miseducate the part of the human family, you're going to miseducate the family. And it's going to spread.
Just clarify for the people who are listening, though, using the term Negro.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. We talking about Carter G. Woodson. You know, that was in there. Yeah, thank you. Because we get an email talking about, so he just said, we'll see you outside. We're not calling people Negroes. However, you know what? Can we talk about that? Yeah. First of all, I was when Dale was asking this question earlier, I wanted to ask you this specifically. Do people use the term black in Africa?
Actually, you don't hardly hear that.
See, that's interesting. Now
It's mostly African, but it's based on the categories that people have written about them.
Right.
But they see themselves as, if they live in Gambia or Nigeria, they're Gambians or they're Nigerians.
Yes.
And the majority of the people are black anyway. So
right.
It becomes, it's not something you think about.
Right. It's a color coordinated system when we say black, right?
Because there you can have friends who are in school with you who happen to be white or Arab or Lebanese or whatever. But it's so, you are in the same community, you all go out, they speak the language like you.
Right.
They just have a different skin tone.
Right.
But the culture is part and parcel of their Africanness. This
is what I'm interested in. I want to get your response to this. There are a lot of, I would say, debates or conversations, right? I won't say debate because that's like somebody trying to prove something. But it's interesting conversations saying that we should get rid of the term black because it is a color coded system, and it really takes away our nationality. We hear a lot of nationality conversations now, and so now I hear a lot of people say, as long as we call ourselves black, we are really kind of cutting ourselves off from a natural state of human life because we're selecting a color instead of a nation. Like if I'm South African, if I'm from Ghana, if I'm from the Congo, you know what I'm saying? And when I just asked you, I said, do even people use the term black in the motherland? Is because a color coordinated system that you self-identify with, I like to ask myself, what was I before somebody told me that I was actually what I looked like instead of who I was? I always ask myself, what did my people call themselves before somebody who was looking at us gave us our title? So how you respond to that?
That's a difficult question. I cannot give you any straight answer on that.
I know
it's so
confusing.
It's so original though.
Okay.
In terms of you putting it out in that context.
Yes, sir.
That you say black people, you get that color code spectrum.
Yeah, it's a game. See, when you political science. When you was you don't know if you saw my facial expression over here. When you were saying it's a game in categories, I was over here like trying to listen, but I was losing it too because I'm sitting up there like, well, that's a category that we check off a box. And as soon as we go to look for a job, I'm no longer from I may be a quote unquote American, but they say, are you black though? And I'm like, man, my folder's black, but my hand ain't like, and we looking at his jacket is black, but his skin is not the same color. However, that's his political assignment. And when you say political science, I'm constantly thinking, I'm like, wow, where did this term black come from? Where did the term Negro come from? Where did the term, all these terms?
Those were categories which were given based on somebody else making those assignments.
Yes. And somebody had to have the power to make an assignment, right?
Right. Okay. But the black, they say it loud, I'm black and proud.
Right. James Brown, recipe. James Brown, that's a bad man.
But you have to, just like we had that problem in terms of defining, people dealing with the N-word, like ownership of it or everything like that. But in terms of black, it's going to be difficult to change that.
It surely is.
Yes. to get rid of it in terms of concept, the concept itself of defining it.
Right.
Or even the question of that whole spectrum that people put categories. Because if you go into the DNA and everything else, everybody is the same.
Right.
That's that much a minuscule difference.
Okay.
But the social construction, which has been made to define people based on how they look, is an important variable that we have to deal with, because the long-term evolution of the people might change that. Because now the census uses different categories year to year. Every 10 years they have new categories coming, because there are some people now who want to be multiracial categories, or some people, what would you tell somebody who is whose father is African, whose mother is from Japan, who's has cousins in Norway, who is maybe has a a nephew who is an Aborigine, and all kinds of configurations.
Okay, I got a couple of questions that just span from that. Okay, we were talking about earlier, the race and the representation in Africa. Okay, being that you live there, if there were any, being the fact that as a people, black people, I know it's a category, but that's
just go ahead.
But black people are the majority.
Right.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, if there were any, what privileges or experience did you have being the dominant ethnic group in a region or in a place, period? How did that transition to everyday life when it came to your interaction with people who aren't black? Like, basically, how do you handle the position of like, right here we have, we call it white privilege here, but did you experience black privilege in Africa compared to other racial groups?
Well, you have distinct categories here. You've got white and black, and because of the history of slavery, and then the colonial mindset and colonialism and all of that, you have those two categories based on policy. Segregation and all of that, race, defining race into categories and access. In Africa, you had that, maybe you had it during the colonial period when the British or the French or the Belgians had their own categories when they came. For example, in South Africa with apartheid, they created, one for Europeans, then they created for Indians, then they created another one for colored people, then they had the last category, the Africans. In other African countries where you had majorities, you had a large population. Colonialism was the system. It was a command and control economy. Access to resources, and then you hire an elite class of Africans who would govern on your behalf so that you get access to the resources. The French and the British and the Belgians, or any of those European powers, did it differently. But in essence, it was having access to whatever they needed in terms of building their own economies back home. So it's difficult in terms of, I would say it's class, because if you went to a good school, or based on your family background itself, then you end up, monopolizing sometimes the resources, because you get an elite class who might be consuming a lot of the resources at the expense of the majority sometimes. And that can become problematic. That's why you might end up having conflicts or have coup d'etats, because some segment of the population is unhappy where they are in terms of having access to the rights and freedoms that others have, or access to resources. Yes.
So it really was, in Africa, it's more about your access and your well-being as a person, not necessarily
how you look. Yes.
Wow.
It can be based on ethnicity in some cases too, where you might have a conflict in terms of different dominant groups, as you pointed out before, ethnic groups who might control the power, or fill in the power vacuum which might have been created because of a conflict. And elites sometimes capitalize on that,
It makes me think about, how somebody says you can't judge a book by its cover? It makes me think that this country is ran straight off book covers.
And back of the book summaries.
Yes, with no information. It's just, your book is about sports. It's like, no, it's really not. Like, you know what I mean? It's, you're basically alienated to what you look like instead of what's actually in your brain, it's in your soul, and in your nature and in your nation and where you come from. Because honestly, when you are color, you no longer have a lineage almost.
Well, it has a lot to do with that that map of human geography again, and where you are. at a given time in history. Because if you look at it, in the 1950s in this country, things were very, very, very difficult for a lot of people, because we have those conversations as to how would this young generation respond to those conditions then.
Oh, I don't have no idea.
So, you see, you can't tell, but there's some people who say, I wouldn't be able to tolerate it, right? No.
I would have chosen to do the sit-ins at the diners, though.
Right.
I'd have did that.
Right.
I would have ordered, though.
Oh.
But y'all don't do that.
You know what's so funny?
I'm for real. I was like, let me before you.
What threw me off earlier, why I started laughing when you said my book isn't about sports. I thought on the back it says the summary is he's a lineman, and then you be like, the only time I'm a lineman is when I'm standing in line for food.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? It just forgoes everything that you are. And the history, I think, you know how some people says black history doesn't start in America, and black history doesn't start with slavery.
No. Sure doesn't.
When you were saying this, when you say I'm Congolese, I'm South African, I'm Ghanaian, that has so much history behind the terms.
Well, before slavery, you had kingdoms, you had trade, you had the pharaohs, in Egypt, you had Mansa Musa,
yes,
all of those people,
the richest person in human history, if I'm not mistaken.
Going to Mecca, gold, the gold that he took going across the Sahara and all of that. So there's a lot of history. Every community around the world had a history of its own until somebody else intervened from outside to make them either take it away or throw it under the bus or whatever term one might express. To basically deny that it existed when it was there in the first place, or take it and use it as your own.
Now, go ahead.
I got two questions. Well, one, what if you don't mind me asking, around what time frame did you come over to America?
Oh, I came to America in the 70s.
In the 70s.
Funkadelic.
Oh yeah, funkadelic.
You got here when the afro was real hot.
Oh yeah, I did.
How was dealing with, coming from your background, how was it dealing with race? How was it was it a culture shock to deal with the racism and the laws and black people over here telling you, hey man, you can't move like that, or you can't do certain things, you learning those things. How did that make you feel? And then I have one more question after that.
But I was fortunate to have people, good people, who basically sheltered me from getting all of that. So I was aware of it. So I had mentors who told me exactly what it was like.
Okay.
Times, and these were people they were African Americans, whites, who were progressive enough to help you navigate this, the community.
I understand. The last question going to, because you started talking about kingdoms and each region have a specific history in themselves. You know how some African American people who call themselves awake or knowledgeable about their history, how do you respond to everyday African American who don't necessarily know their heritage? They say, "Oh well, we're this." When we say we're the superior race, or black women are the mothers of humanity, or we are descendants of kings and queens. Is that accurate? Or how does that go across?
There's no superior race. It's only one race.
Wow.
I mean,
man, you gonna start a fight at a cookout, Dr. Jallow?
That's what I want to get at.
Yeah, no, that's good.
But the point is this, though. In terms of the history of civilizations, there were kings and queens and pharaohs all in Africa. There were communities which were smaller, communities in which you didn't have a lot. They were not organized into monarchies. You had kings and queens or emirs or chiefs, in which there was some sort of traditional political systems in place to control trade and everything else between communities or between kingdoms. that existed a long time before slavery and all of that. But it didn't show that, they were superior to any other race around the world, because societies were evolving around the same time. But then when you had slavery as an institution intervening, it took away that natural state of affairs which was evolving in terms of development for any human being or any human society. That was taken away, ripped off. And that, in essence, after that you had colonialism. So people are still paying for that in terms of, trying to reconfigure new layers. That's what these things are talking about, the Agenda 2063 and everything. Because they are conscious of what happened in the past, and that if we're going to build a stronger society, this is the way for us to go.
That's real. Yeah.
All right, bear with me. First of all, next semester, be prepared to have a lot of questions from me in your class.
All right.
But just building off what Dale was saying, pretty much the whole entire conversation. Now, there is so much about Africa that I do not know, that I found out I've been lied to, like the size of the continent. One thing, one thing that really stuck out to me was when Dale asked you about being black in Africa, and hear you talk about it. What really stuck out is I've heard some details about how South Africa and apartheid, and how it's just an amazing place to live, but there are white people there who don't want the native Africans to be, or any black person to be there. And hold on, it was there.
Just work through it.
Yeah, okay.
No, but I can just say this briefly about apartheid. You see, apartheid has been there from the, these Afrikaners, these Dutch-speaking people, are the ones who, in essence, created apartheid in 1948 with the Nationalist Party. And most of them wanted to control South African resources when it came to gold and diamonds and everything. So they created this apartheid system, which in essence means separateness. And they created Bantustans. So they took the majority of the African population, which is about 87% of the population, and put them in lands which you had no quality in them in terms of agriculture or anything, no minerals, nothing, and took out all the other parts for themselves. And that led to a struggle with the African National Congress, and Nelson Mandela and people before Nelson Mandela started to fight. So because when they were fighting, when the ANC, the African National Congress, was formed in 1912, that was way before the Russian Revolution. But when the ANC was fighting against apartheid, in some of the media, they were saying that they were communists, when before even the Communist Party was created in Russia. Are you following?
Yeah.
That kind of Cold War scenario was then evolving. So today, though, South Africa is independent. Nelson Mandela, when he was released from prison, he served 2 terms and retired, and then you had other presidents who came. So today, South Africa is a power broker. It's a regional power in Africa, with Zuma as the president, and they are part and parcel of the African Union. They have domestic issues themselves in terms of their government, but at least they are governed by their own people based on democracy, a multiracial democracy that they have created. Yeah.
Okay.
Need some time?
No, I don't know if I should ask it, but I'm still asking anyway.
Just try to make it radio friendly if you can.
Okay. Well, what I want to say.
What you think about all these?
No, I know how to behave. What I want to say is, because I know they say that apartheid has ended. So what I want to say is, has it really ended, or has it just like slavery and segregation in America, has it simply just take a different form?
No, you raise an excellent question in terms of the resources as to who might still control them in terms of, But since independence, though, I mean, when Mandela came to power, they have been able to allocate, redistribution of wealth has taken place. But there are still major problems in the economic sphere. As a good example is the recent riots against, other Africans from other countries who live in South Africa. Because the thing is, during the time of apartheid, the school system was a disaster. I mean, they didn't train Africans that well, and they wanted them to learn the Africana language. And because of that, when independence came, you had a large, you had to have people who would be the civil servants who will run the government. You ended up having a lot of people from adjacent countries to come in and be involved in business and governing, but it ended up, creating that kind of resentment, which is natural, Right. You're just coming from outside and taking over and everything else, and that created some tension just 2 weeks ago in South Africa. The governments involved are resolving it because essentially they want to have some, peace and people can work together.
Okay. Yeah. Now, kind of want to guide this conversation to the Africana Studies department. Okay. In your words, what's the current status of the department, and where do you see the department itself going from here forward?
Well, at this point, we're trying to recruit minors. Okay. One of the problems that we have had in the past is students who would take classes, maybe the intro class, and then they wouldn't. They might be here for one semester, they're gone, or they have financial difficulties, or if they're timing for them to graduate, they might not be able to complete the seminar class because of what their major requirements are.
Right.
We're trying to work through that, and we have been successful in the past working with different departments.
Right.
To make sure that there's some sort of coordination so that the students can be able to finish in a timely fashion. Okay. It's 15 credit hours that you need.
Right.
2 core classes, the Intro to Africana Studies, and then the seminar class.
Right.
And then you can take 3 other elective classes, a total of 15.
Okay.
So
and that constitutes as a minor.
Yes, that constitutes as a minor.
Okay.
We have faculty who volunteer their time, outside of their schedules in their own departments who help teach some of these classes. And that makes it difficult on them. So that's why we would like to see, maybe get instructors, for the center who can teach some of those classes, because then it can help us recruit more. And since we're doing this consolidation with Armstrong,
right,
we want to see what they have to offer, and we can all work together. Maybe by coming together, we can be able to enhance, especially in Savannah and
to sustain. It helps sustain the department itself.
Yes, because they have their own programs there too. But we want to work with them to make it larger and bigger, and maybe eventually do something else.
I got a question. My question is, are there any classes that you feel that Southern does not offer pertaining to African studies that they should offer?
No, I mean, some other departments complement the Center for Africana Studies, like, writing and linguistics, the history department, political science, sociology and anthropology, and other departments. But it would be nice to see have people who might be able to teach some of the African languages, like Yoruba, Swahili or something, which can be, there's a lot of demand for that. A lot of the students say, I want to take Yoruba. But the Yoruba instructor who was here, unfortunately passed.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Is there a class on African spirituality given here?
No, we don't have that. I mean, that would be yes, because I know some people who teach it in other places. But that would be in philosophy and religion.
Well, is African spirituality considered a religion? Because I've heard different conversation that no, spirituality and religion is 2 different things.
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
I got you. Because I've seen some of those conversations get quite intense. You know? Because some people say that spirituality is your personal relationship with the Creator, or whoever you think
or
the
spirituality,
is, or spirituality, or and this was some people. This is what I heard some people have said. I'm not going to define it for everybody, but some people say it is your relationship with the Creator and other specific African deities or personifications of nature and stuff like that. But I do understand that a lot of people, especially in our society, have been told not to deal with it because of the negative connotation behind it. But I don't know it. It's just like we've been miseducated by Africa. African spirituality has also been one of those things where,
but you know, it still has an influence though, around place in Louisiana, in Puerto Rico, in Brazil, or in communities where you have this strong African presence. It's that link with Mother Nature and the symbolism and the images,
of course,
in which some positive energy has brought about some positive things or vibes, you might call it, and help to maintain a community. And as a result, it becomes some sort of a temple, you know, a temple of hope, just to carry a community through. So that it's relevant in terms of religion.
It really is.
Yes,
it really is. One thing, I went to a village, the Oyotunji village.
Oh yes, in
South Carolina. Yes, and one of the main things that I've realized there is because, one of the main things I realized is that their communication with natural things. And they were just talking about minerals of the earth and the minerals in your body and the antenna of the brain and the nerves from the bottom of the feet. They go all the way up to the brain. And they were just talking about how calm you can be just by being barefoot in nature. Just making sure that the bottom of your feet touch the earth, not the concrete, but the actual earth. And then they say you'd be surprised because we're a people of the earth, and when you go out there and be one with the earth, you feel more connected. And that's the reason. And it was so interesting because he said you ever asked yourself, why are more people stressed out, or more people who you see crime is higher in inner cities where you have a lot of concrete, where you have all these different mechanisms and all this technology. A lot of people are disconnected. They're connected, but they're disconnected.
Well, it's the atomization of society and people passing each other, talking past each other. Too.
And it's in the
sharing, yes.
And so a lot of people don't, like Metropolis, he was talking about the city is an unnatural state. Like when, he said even in ancient Africa, when they had cities, it was a lot of grass in these cities. It was
spaces.
It was natural things. It was fruit everywhere. It was herbs everywhere. It was different. It wasn't all this pollution. It wasn't a whole bunch of traffic. It wasn't a whole bunch of crime, but it was still considered a metropolis. You know what I mean? So
the Olotunji village, we've been there before.
I liked it. I definitely liked it. I plan on going back. I plan on going back.
Because they have their own local traditions and the kids and everything else. They try to recreate the Yoruba kinds of traditions in Nigeria.
Exactly. I did want to ask you, we were talking about Africana Studies. For people, and you say you need not only students to be interested and involved with Africana Studies, you say you need instructors, right?
We would need some instructors just to help us, in terms of making sure that we can offer more classes.
Okay.
And by doing that, we'll be able to recruit more people.
Right.
And the fact that, we're consolidating with Armstrong State University, the people there who are doing the same thing in African American Studies, we can work with them to be able to, there's a big market there we can recruit from.
Right.
And get people who will be able to teach those classes, which are important. I mean, you've got military bases here. You can have African Americans in the military or classes like that.
Of course.
You can talk about classes which you can be able to combine science like 3D printers, a class like that with coding, and to produce goods and services like African toys or African American toys, or things like that. I mean,
what would be the credentials that somebody would need in order to help teach in Africana Studies? Do they need a bachelor's, master's, doctorate?
I think the minimum at Georgia Southern is they're calling for a master's in that particular area. For example, if you needed an instructor in Yoruba, for example, it would have to be somebody who has a master's in Yoruba or Swahili. Or it could be somebody with a PhD in linguistics or something. So they would have to be within that.
All right.
Yes.
For students, I know we talked maybe like a couple of years ago, maybe last year, about how to get the word out for Africana Studies, right? For some students that may be listening right now, what is the first step in getting the word out, a clear and supportive word out about Africana Studies, and when students should be trying to sign up for that? Because I know sometimes if I have a conversation like, you should take the class, then the student may ask me some questions. I'll be like, well, I don't know. But you're supposed to take it. It's
right.
So,
well, I mean, when they come in the fall, though, because when the Multicultural Student Center has their event, sometimes we take material there.
Good.
Or sometimes we have tables. We used to have tables at the union when we had work study students or when we had a secretary. Then for the center, when we had the Forest Drive building, the center was like some sort of a place for all the students to come.
I remember it.
We had a large number of students coming through. They would, use the computers and all of that. And by doing that, that helped. To
get the word
people,
out.
Individuals, one by one.
Because they had a space to bring their friends and get the word out. Because word of mouth is much better than a brochure and a flyer.
Yes, because the brochure, I brought some actually.
Cool.
So that they can be able to see.
And I can show this on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
All righty. Yeah, we got some brochures for the Center for Africana Studies right in front of us. Okay. So talk about what's going on in the brochure for people who can't see it.
Well, it lists the classes that we do offer, and some of the things that we do at the center, whether it's the Model African Union or taking trips. Sometimes we take trips to a place like Alabama.
Yes, I went on that trip with you.
Yes,
sir.
They went to different places and museums. And by doing that, we help students not only to be in the classroom alone, but to go to sites which people usually don't think of, even if they live in that town.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So I would say this: do you have a? Because I know we say when we use the word more a lot, right? We need more teachers. We need more students. What is a good number for people to kind of shoot for? When you say more, what is a number that would constitute as enough?
Well, it's an institutional thing because you have to make a very strong case. And when students, start to take the minor, then they drop out. They would want to see those numbers as to how many students, the ones who drop out. Not because it's their fault. It's because of circumstances.
Of course.
Financial aid or a job or something else.
Of course.
Would intervene. So you get the numbers fluctuating. And by doing that, you have to be able to make that case. But you can also make the argument that if you are able to get an instructor to teach some of this intro class, like the intro class, we can get people who can teach that. You can teach that. Everybody else, you and Michael, I've always been saying that.
Yes.
To be able to do that for us and get a large group of people. And by doing that, we can get a few, who decide to go along with the minor.
How can we help support that notion? So say, for instance, if you see some people who would be really good at teaching in Africana Studies, how would we help you support that notion? What is something that students or other faculty can say, hey, we got other people that want to teach it? What does that process look like?
Well, I think one of the things that I've observed in other places is when they give out the budget lines, is to say, okay, we'll give the center, whether it's Africana Studies or Women and Gender Studies, have a line. And say to be an incentive to another department, say, we'll give you have a line here too, so that you'll work with them. Which means, by doing that, then they give you the entire budget for that. But that money, if there's a department willing to work with you, then they would have that release time and that money for you to be able to get somebody who will do that.
Ah, okay.
And I would like to see something like that, some sort of an arrangement like that.
Got you.
In which the people who are teaching it, sometimes they are not evaluated within their own departments for what they do.
Right.
In the center. They do it because they are committed to it. Not necessarily that it's evaluated in terms of their own individual departments.
Right. So it's a array of things that need to be linear and fall into place.
Yes.
So I would say, for the sake of it, like if people who listen to this show right now, if they want to come and just brainstorm with you and how they can get more support or have more people to get in contact with you to say, hey, I am actually interested and I'm qualified to teach in Africana Studies and I'm qualified in teaching fill in the blank. I am qualified in teaching Yoruba or comedic sciences or whatever. You know what I mean? The best way to get that word to you is by doing what?
Just send me an email. Come by the office at the Carl Building, room 2202.
2202
Carol sit down and talk, or maybe go and have lunch.
Yes, you steadily you do support lunch, and that's the reason why we're so close. Dr. Jallow is a lunch supporter, I swear. Like for real. Like every time we meet, I was like, I need to talk to you. How about lunch? I was like, okay. If you insist. I wasn't really wanting to, but my stomach.
I feel like that's like a cultural thing. Is it like because I know here in America, as like black people, everything is discussed over a meal. Like if you got a big decision, talk to your daddy, mom about it at dinner. So it's like, is that us as a people everywhere?
I guess maybe for many people they feel, comfortable in that kind of setting to be able to, you don't have to formalize everything. Because if it is an office, it's like, there's some sort of dynamic which is different when we're sitting in a place in which we can have a good conversation.
Right.
So, and I think that, we used to go to the Caribbean feast.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
And I saw it's not there, and I shed a tear.
Yeah,
I did. Like where?
There's University Wings now.
Yeah. I'm going to go and support. You know what I'm saying? Is it also black owned?
Yeah.
It is.
I think so.
Yeah. If not, it's probably somebody black in line. I'll support them. That racist?
Hilarious.
Was that racist?
No.
That was racist. All right. Funny. It was funny? Okay, enjoy. All right. But it's Wings University. You don't have to graduate to go. All righty. So, but shout out to them for real. I'm going to try to go. But thank you first of all, thank you for your time today. We have... I think we had a list of questions for you. I think we got some of the stuff that you were saying was so interesting. We just had to, we had to ask you to explore that a little bit more, especially when we start talking about categories, games, politics. When we start talking about resources and just about people, just being connected to the mother country, being connected to where you're from, and miseducation. How deep miseducation can go, and ignorance is being manufactured. And I think one thing as an educator that I'm finding out is just like we have to go to school to get educated, people have to go through several levels of miseducation in order to feed this whole machine of dehumanizing other people. And that's why I think some people may have the misconception of black history. When we hear the term or we hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, some people really literally get offended at the sight and the notion that black people or people who consider themselves black or Africana Studies are trying to take their place in the human world. And not only in the human world, in history, we're talking about physically, mentally, spiritually. African people and people from African descent have a lot to offer the planet. And if you don't allow that offering to take place, everybody suffers. But it's confusing if certain people look like they have a privilege in the whole process. But they may not understand how much they're losing out too, just because they're winning at the game you mentioned earlier.
Right.
So I think when it comes down to it, and we were talking about resources from the mother country, right? And the difference between being utilized and used.
Yes.
Utilized and
exploited.
Yeah, exploited, utilized and compromised. And I think when it's in dehumanized level of manipulation of the resources, when you start killing and murdering and keeping people from natural resources, like being able to get fresh water, and so and now I mentioned Flint earlier. But when you talking about resources, something that the body actually needs. And when we start talking about the lack of resources, and conflict goes hand in hand. And I know we hear, I know I hear the term, and y'all can chime in, if you can, about the phrase black on black crime. I know that gets thrown all over the time. It has its own label, and and one of the things I find interesting is even crime is labeled. I said, what's the difference between black on black crime and crime? I always ask them, is that a different
crime
level
is
of crime?
right.
I thought crime was crime, but it's just like water and black on black water. You racialize water? Like I thought it was just a human, that was a human thing. So I guess what I wanted you to respond to, all the things that you talked about tonight, and honestly, the more you talk, the more questions I start thinking about. And I think that's the learning process in itself, right? The conversation is supposed to spike, pique your interest, supposed to make you go try to go research, make you go try to say, well, hold up, maybe I didn't know all of this. Maybe I didn't know all of that. So I would say, after talking with us today, what does Dr. Jallow think about this whole experience? I think that's what I want to ask you. About tonight.
No, I learned a lot in this conversation.
Really? Like what?
Your individual contributions.
Okay.
And the kind of questions you all raised, because some of them maybe I've not even thought about before.
Okay.
For example, what Dale asked earlier about how coming here from that kind of setting, what my impressions were, and being able to describe it in such a way that you never think of it until when it hits you.
I think that's one of the most important things people can learn from you, period. Your personal experience. And I think that's one of the questions that I omitted by mistake, of course. I'm looking at the questions now. What are some things that you experienced that gave you your personality? Yeah.
I don't know.
Because honestly, a lot of people who may not know you, you seem real genuine, laid back, nice guy, but that's a lot of things you've probably seen and experienced came to you, made you who you are. But everything ain't, peaches and cream and butterflies landing on roses, right?
Not at all, no.
So I want to ask you, and you don't have to go into detail because life is life, right?
No, yeah,
but
life is life.
Can you let us know some of the things or some of the levels of things that you experienced that got you to where you are right now?
No, it's learning how to be patient, because, I used to, in high school, just be... you all do it here too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
High school days, you all, when it's time to go fight or something.
Yes, sir.
Behind the school.
Yes.
Yeah, you all form a ring.
Yeah, y'all did the little ring. Dr. Jallow, you were fighting in high school. That's funny. Dr. Jallow's a fighter.
You see? I made you laugh, right?
I'm seriously, because don't get me wrong, sometimes we have a professor that we really because nothing can take the respect that I have for you, but sometimes I take the humanness away from you. I can't even think of you in high school was just like, hold on for a second, I heard what you said in third period.
Yeah.
Meet me by the bus.
Yeah.
If I caught you saying that, I would literally have to go lay down somewhere from laughing. Seriously.
Read them the right, right?
Yes, exactly. Because the only thing, everything I talk to you about is about history, it's about politics, it's about better, it's about. But if you say, "Oh no, I had to tap that chin a couple of times," I'm like, that's so Dr. But no, that's so you had a full life. You had a life.
Yeah, you have to navigate those those arenas when they come about.
Gotcha.
The best way you can.
Did you have
you have to stand for yourself.
Now we got to ask you this. Did you win?
It's
Don't say it's complicated. Now we got to search for Buddy. Dr. Jallow got folk missing. I'm sorry. I'm just playing. Y'all should have
maybe it's 50-50.
Yeah.
You win some, you lose some.
Okay,
right?
is the person no longer with us? Let us know, Dr. Jallow. We'll stop. We'll go to another question. I asked him, did he win? He was like, oh, Chris. Oh, man. Yes.
Did they make it out of the hospital?
Oh, I don't know. Why do you say that?
Yeah, let's move to the next question. Let's do that. But thank you for doing it. But I would say, and I want to turn this into a serious note as well. What are some of the unfortunate things that you've seen human beings go through that you had to witness that kind of gave you your passion for helping people and for them to know exactly what has happened?
Unfortunate that I have witnessed?
Either witnessed or read about or even personally experienced.
No, I mean, for me, it has to do with the fact that in the world that we live in today, there are millions of people who go to bed hungry.
Okay.
When there's food enough out there that people can use to be able to make it another day.
Okay.
That every night you get people who die because they don't have something to eat.
Wow.
That is taking away from our humanity.
Right.
And we cannot say that we're making policy, good policy, when every day we get up and spend more buying weapons than feeding people.
I'm gonna let that just marinate, because you can't. It's not that much. That don't even need to be explained. What you just said. Hopefully, we can find ourselves in a place where we can. The priority will become human life again.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I realize now, I shouldn't trade my luxury for a lack of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of times people say, well, you shouldn't complain. You should be happy where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
But the concern I heard in your voice, I mean, you're a professor at a university. However, the concern in your voice, you can't continue. You can't just be 100% happy knowing that people are suffering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you just have no regard for
right.
people.
That's right.
And so I think that's a good thing for us to at least ask ourselves, the people who enjoy luxuries, but we still have a heart for people, are we really happy knowing what we know?
Right. That is a good question.
That is a really good question.
Because you have not achieved that objective of saying that you've done the best you can when there's a missing piece out there.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And so when somebody says, are you happy? And they're like, look, I'm thankful.
I'm thankful, but
right. And I'm not
there's so many other problems out there.
Yeah.
There are solutions out there, but why are we not fixing it?
Right. And honestly, too, everyone who's connected to people and people's well-being, allow yourself to feel that at a healthy level, I would say. Because we're talking about mindsets.
Right.
We talk about mental health.
Right.
And I know caring about people is a stressful state.
Yes, because the worst thing is to label other people. And when you are not in their shoes, you cannot be thinking for them.
Right.
And when you try to think for somebody else, you're taking away from yourself.
That is true.
That means you don't understand yourself first.
Wow. So how do you keep from doing that?
Well, people do it every day.
Yeah.
And, people who will, just take you for granted.
Yeah.
Just, but they get answers from other people who will try to actually push them in the right direction.
Right.
And then they go find out.
Okay.
It's the way you treat people.
Right. That's what it boiled down to. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to conclude our show, man. Fellas, do y'all have any last questions or any comments? What did y'all learn from the show today?
A lot. I learned that I learned what it feels like to be a regular person, not just a black person. Well, I've heard the perspective of how it feels to just be who you are, not a statistic, not like categorized, just a human being. I've experienced through someone else what it's like to just be a human being and be accepted for who you are in your culture, not because of what you're labeled as.
Right. All right.
And I hope that I can experience that one day.
That's great.
I learned. Okay, I basically learned there's still so much about Africa that I don't know, have no clue about, and I'm looking forward to learning with you. Or from you.
Well, thank you.
You already putting in extra credit tips.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to get that.
So thanks for coming. We'll talk.
Yes, just want you to know I'm the only student in that class that was on the radio with you.
The plug. AK the Don, you got something? What did you learn today, bro?
One of the main things I really learned and I've been learning is perception. Okay. And the perception of how we have on each other, we have on the different countries like Africa and in America, and how we just view blacks in both lands. Mm-hmm. And how it really just starts with us and wanting to learn, because the only way we can learn is through action and through attempt.
Right.
So just like as we end the show, I just want people to just think about that perception that we give each other and how we see each other, and just attempt to try to find that knowledge to understand one another.
That's real, man. That's real. What I learned today, I think that what stuck out to me the most is when you were talking about the game we're playing, and the relationship between the lack of resources and conflict. Mm-hmm. And so the things that we have to think about when people are painted as conflict-ridden people or violent people, from now on, what I'm going to do is, if they're violent people, I need to know what type of resources they are around. Or if they've been labeled violent, right, I need to see their living situation. I need to see the policies that affect them. I need to see their I guess their level of clean water, clean air. Yeah. What does their grocery store look like? You know what I'm saying? Is your grocery store full of dented cans? Is your grocery store full of meat that's not fresh? You'd be surprised if you go in some of these neighborhoods and you're trying to figure out why people act the way they act. And when I met Dick Gregory, sometimes I listen to Dick Gregory a lot. And depending on your water quality, you'd be surprised what's in some people's water that make people act a certain way. So I always like to ask myself, man, what are the other policies that affect where people live? Are people naturally violent, or do people get affected by the resources being scarce and strategically being eliminated from their environment? Another thing you talked about today is politics is everywhere. Either you're going to be involved in them or not. You can be engaged, and if you're not engaged, sitting back and wondering what's happening is counterproductive. Right? You talked about Agenda 2063. I'm going to research that a little bit more when I leave. So a lot of people who may not understand what that is, Google Agenda 2063 and keep reading. And if you get any more answers, keep just doing your research and try to get that out as much as you can. And I really understand, at least I'm going to ask more questions on the term black and where it came from. Where people in Africa, in ancient Africa, did they call themselves a color? Did they call themselves a shade of their complexion? Or did they call themselves who they were from the ground up? I'm going to research that. So I really just appreciate your patience and your time with us. We really want to just thank you for just allowing yourself to come in and give us all of this knowledge. Do you want to give us a closing remark before we?
Well, thank you also very much. I've learned a lot myself.
That's cool.
And coming here, made my day in terms of interacting with the kinds of ideas that you all have in terms of things which are important.
That's real.
And critical in terms of making society better.
That's real.
That each of us has a role to play.
That's real.
We bring all those roles together, we put them together. That outcome betters everybody else. So I'm glad that I came and for giving me that opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we just like to say thank you for all of your years of service, all the lives that you touched. There's a lot of alumni that was on Facebook saying, that's my favorite teacher, that's my favorite teacher. So some of the things that you expose some of these students to, they're taking it out in the real world. I'm pretty sure they're creating a lot of change. So you're affecting lives you haven't necessarily came into contact with, but you're changing them every day. So we want to just tell you thank you and just keep going.
Thank you.
And let us know how we can support you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All righty, Big Dog, you ready to roll?
Oh yeah.
Let's get it.
So ready.
Let's get it.
This has been another episode of Manhood Mindset on WVGS 91.9 The Buzz.
Sir.
It's better this way.
See y'all later. Peace.